إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد السلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. أسعد الله أيامنا وأيامكم. Before we commence with the khutbah, it has been a year since we bid farewell to a very dear and a beloved member of our community, Marhum Muhammad Ali Hirji Somani. Can we pray Surah Fatiha for him and also for Gulzar Begum Somani, Kulsum Bai Somani, all the marhumin of Hansraj and Somani families, all the marhumin, and of course we've learned the sad news of the demise of Marhum Mohsin Ja'far. Fatiha for them and all our marhumin. It is the occasion of the birth of the Blessed Prophet, and I felt it pertinent to talk a little bit about this Blessed Prophet of ours. In terms of his own personality, he was a very caring, loving, parental figure to his people. And that is what the people saw in him. They did not see a man who had come with the staff of authority to make them into better people. Rather, they saw that here is a genuine person who is concerned about our welfare. He is sacrificing his own self, not gaining anything, and he wants what is better for us. People saw that in him, that sincerity, that spirit with which he was sacrificing everything that he had in order to bring the people to a better state of inner existence. They saw him sympathizing with them. He empathized with them. He did not gain anything from them. This was the thing that won people over to him. On so many occasions, we find people coming aggressively to the Prophet. Yet when they observed his calm demeanor, his forgiving nature, the way he pardoned, the way he cared, immediately they began to turn. They began to say, no, he doesn't have any gain in this. He just wants what is better for us. And if you look at his attitude towards people, it wasn't an attitude in which he condemned people or held himself to be more righteous than the people. You could see him caring like a parent cares for his children, that it pains me to see my child being in inner state of despair and turmoil. He saw ailing hearts. He saw wounded souls in them. And with a lot of empathy and sympathy, he touched them and he started curing them. These were the people who were his best followers, the initial people that he had, who became so endowed in his message. What he taught them was that I am learning as I'm imparting to you. We are on this journey together. It wasn't imposition. He was sharing his beautiful experience and his journey with the people. As he became involved with God and fell deeply in love with God, those around him also became involved in God and became deeply connected with God. So when the verses were speaking to him, as he was learning, he was imparting these verses and they were learning as well. These verses were not about do's and don'ts. No, the initial verses that were coming, that were saying to them, do not worry. Be trusting of Allah. Allah knows what is best for you. Do the right thing. Tend to Allah. There is a greater purpose. There is a greater calling. As he was getting these messages, he was changing within his own self. And as he was imparting these verses, They were seeing that he is changing with them. And they too began to grow with those beautiful verses. Now, one of the most phenomenal things this phenomenal prophet does is he forgives everybody. Now, the best way to encourage a person to become a better person is to forgive them. When we remind people of their sins and of their former transgressions and disobedience, it rids them of that confidence to become better. But when you go to a person and say, I forgive you, you are not an evil person, you are a good person, realize that you are suffering. You have become entrapped in this inner turmoil. There is a way out. This is not a righteous or rightful state for you. You don't find comfort in there, and I know this. I feel your pain. Allah forgives all sins. Turn to Allah. He will take you to another level of your existence. Why are you so worried? Why are you so caught up? In this way, He liberated people from inner bondage and slavery. What difference does it make what others will say about you? What difference does it make if you lose something? You are going to die eventually anyway. So He spoke with them with a lot of sympathy, a lot of care, a lot of love. The other thing that the Blessed Prophet does is, and this is something we need to actually understand, that he understood the nature of human beings. He knows that you can't force people, you can't coerce them. You can only force people's bodies. You can't fool people intellectually. You can only get away with it for some time. After that, the people will awaken. The only way reform can come is when people understand it and are willing to take it on board. So the first thing he introduces is that Allah Ghani, Allah is needless. It doesn't make any difference to God whether you prostrate before Him or you don't. Even if all of you were to reject God, it doesn't make any difference to God. So Allah has no gain in your reformation. 2, He then spoke with them in a language in which they understood that no, what He is saying makes sense. You see, if you want true transformation, the person has to take it on willfully. They have to commit to it from their own being and souls. Otherwise, transformation doesn't come about. We cannot force people. The Quran says to the Prophet when he was overly concerned about the people and he was struggling that why aren't they listening to that which is good for them? The Quran says, "Oh Muhammad, shall you force them to become believers? We know you are concerned. We know you're losing your sleep because of your concern for them. We know it pains you, but relieve your heart of this pain. Allah knows what He is doing." So here the Prophet himself is growing. Trust Allah. We know it pains you, but trust Allah, do your duty. Now when people heard these verses, they saw that this Muhammad actually is suffering because of us. Because we are not paying heed. It is causing him pain. And on the other hand, the revelation is saying to him, leave them alone. And yet he is not ready to leave us alone. He wants to pursue this imparting of the human and godly message. This then brought a lot of trust in their hearts towards the Prophet. Now the Prophet, he began with explaining to them the values of what he was teaching them. He reasoned with them. And of course, we have that phenomenal verse of the Quran, La ikraha fid deen. There is no coercion in religion. If you want, take it on. But more than that, it was to actually give a principle that by coercion, religion of God cannot be adopted. Because at the end of the day, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is looking for willful surrender from within. He's not looking at coercion. Now think about this just slightly. We are 8 billion people on the face of this planet. Yes? Now, this planet is one in a billions, in one in billions within our galaxy. And our galaxy is one in trillions within the galaxies that are out there. Now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who is the author of all these galaxies and the multiverse and the multidimensional existence and beyond that, do you really think it makes any difference to Allah in that way, whether we believe in Him or not? Does it make any difference to Allah? One person does prostration, another one doesn't. One says Allah and the other one says Bhagwan. What difference does it make to God? In fact, if such things made difference to God, we would not believe in that God, would we? We would not want to believe in a God that's so petty-minded. You don't call me Allah. You don't do your ruku properly. You don't do your sajda properly. You don't do namaz properly. That's not the Allah we worship. We worship Allah. Allah. He is beyond hell and heaven. Who is He? Hell and heaven do not reach Him. Even the name Allah cannot reach Him. The one who is immediately available, so intimate that is inescapable. And one who is so majestic that even the blessed soul of the Prophet cannot understand Him. If Prophet were to have introduced that sort of a God that we've begun to worship, I would say today, oh Lord, you're not worthy of worship. Take me to my God who has accepted me as I am. Oh Lord, for the one who has created trillions of galaxies, I expect far more from you than this. I will say to my Lord, oh Lord, tear this heart apart and take this soul out and burn the soul if you can. It will call only you. This is the level of love that I have for you. I expect far more from you than this. That is a God Muhammad Rasulullah introduces to his people. When they see this God, they fall in love with this God. And they see that whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling them is based on goods and values that are good for them. As soon as they commit themselves, they start to grow, and you find the formation of a godly community. When people do not understand the message of God, that is when people are averse to it. But when somebody understands the message of God, they adhere to it. And to be honest with you, the message of God is well beyond namaz and roza and hajj and all that. I don't think a God that is confined to the Kaaba is God worthy of worship in the first place. It's just a direction for the Muslims to face. Those guys are facing Jerusalem, you guys face Makkah. Who will face Makkah and Jerusalem who are living up there in the mighty galaxies? Will they face Kaaba and Jerusalem? They don't even know Kaaba and Jerusalem. They can't be bothered with Kaabas and Jerusalems. There are creations of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, according to the narrations of the Imams, and Ibn Arabi also cites from the Imams here, that don't even know that something like the earth exists or Adam has been created. That is how grand Allah is. In any case, the Quran says that He reasons with them. He admonishes them. But it isn't the word that is spoken by Him. It is the genuine care and concern for the people. The depth of His own humanness and human parental concern intertwined with the words that touches them at the heart. So the words of the Quran were never enough. It was the modelship and the being of Muhammad Rasulullah that carried those words with care and sympathy and empathy that touched the hearts. So after explaining to them, He lifts the burdens off their shoulders and breaks their shackles and frees them. So the whole process was to free the human. When the human is free, the human will grow. Like Rafi'uddin on the one hand, تَضَعُ عَنْهُمْ إِسْرَهُمْ وَالْأَغْلَالَ الَّتِي كَانَتْ عَلَيْهِمْ. And then there is no coercion in religion, and then lifting the weight and breaking the shackles. What does that mean? That the souls have to freely be endowed with the message of God, and souls have to grow. You see, it's a very wrong thing to expect the souls to be decent by force, because the souls internally will be corrupted, the bodies will abide by the law of decency. It is only when the soul has been awoken to its nobility that it wants to stay away from indecency. The Islam that we are practicing today is the Islam of the body. It's not the Islam of the soul. The soul has gone. Look at the debates that we conduct day and night, and the books that we fill up, how to do wudu, how big your beard should be, how to do tawaf. The books are filled with these discussions, the historical discussions of who introduced this and who introduced that. In the midst of all that, where is Allah? Allah is gone. There is no God left in this Islam. Can you not see that? There is no God left at all in humanity. In the teachings that are there, God is in here. He needs to be awoken. Look at all the contributions we have made. How much of Allah remains? Nothing. And how much of the essential message of Muhammad Rasulullah remains? Nothing. Is it possible that in the 8 billion community of human beings, in which 6 billions are committed to faith, 6 billion people are committed to faith, and they all advocate a loving God, and this be the state of humanity? Look at the state of humanity. It's pitiful. It's embarrassing and shameful. Look at where we are today, fighting and killing in the 21st century. The little babies who took birth from the time of Adam are still fighting for plots of land and for sustenance. And they've forgotten that they're one human family. And that is only because the religion and the message that was so transformative in the time of the Prophet Muhammad and Isa is no longer transformative, because we have forgotten the real message. The real message was the essential message of making minds think, of liberating, of freeing people, of endowing them with a nobler purpose. I do not understand how a person falls in love with Allah and then disdains from engaging with God in private conversation. The very fact that we have to force people to pray namaz shows that they are not with God. And if they don't want to pray namaz, then it is their right not to pray namaz. Let them fall in love with Allah first, and let the hearts approach Allah. And if somebody has fallen in love with Allah and is not a Muslim and just says Subhanallah, I have no doubt that that one Subhanallah of that person is worth far more than a lifelong prayers of this person, because he has found God. He is with his Allah. And that is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants ultimately. And I'm going to ask a question. You know, in the future world, when we become spaceborne and we fly away, which Kaaba will we face? And if we live on a planet or in space, how many hours of fast will we fast? How many rakat salah will we pray if we go to a planet in which the day is 1 month long? How many salah will we pray? You see, this is an invitation. Religion was never meant to be all these formalistic acts. These formalistic acts were always there to train the body in order to awaken the mind and the soul. It's like disciplining little kids. Do your homework, otherwise I will ground you. But when the child matures and understands the worth of studies, they will go away and abandon their social life in order to study, once they understand the importance of it. Religion was always essential, a deep-seated connection with God. The reason why the Prophet was so successful was because he did not say, pray, otherwise Allah will burn you. He didn't. He didn't say it that way. The people of hell say, Lam naku minal musallin, wa lam naku nut'imul miskin. We did not establish that deep connection with Allah. And we did not feed the other. They are talking about the essence. We did not have that finer calling within. We did not pay heed to that finer calling within. We did not care for the other. These are the aspects of the human soul, not the human body. The reason the Prophet was so successful was because he treated human beings as dignified human beings. He valued their dignity. He reasoned with them. He showed them care and love. He forgave them. He prayed to Allah to forgive them. He says, they are children, they do not know, O my Lord, forgive them, overlook their flaws. This is what awoke the hearts. And that is why his community was possibly the best community ever within the folds of Islam. And no community subsequently has topped that community because of the approach of the Blessed Prophet and his genuine concern and love. I'm going to end this khutbah here. Anybody taking the leadership of the Muslims in whatever capacity, they need to study the deeper character of the Prophet. They really do. The Prophet did not come with the seal of authority to force people to pray and fast. No. There is no prayer without a willing heart. There is no fast without a willing heart. None of these religious obligations mean anything. Abdurrahman ibn Muljim prayed. He recited Quran and he assassinated the best of people. Umar ibn Sa'd and his people prayed. They fasted. They were Muslims. They put Imam Hussein to death. These prayers mean nothing. These are just bodily postures. Leadership in Islam should be conversant and aware of the spiritual message of Prophet Muhammad, the spiritual message of the Quran, that you have been entrusted with a community that are your children. Be sympathetic. If you forgive your children and reason with them and calmly educate them, then know that that is a nature that God has placed inside your soul. God by priority has the same nature of forgiving, of overlooking, of pardoning, of reasoning, of tolerance, of love. If we can maybe attain that, then the human community can be assisted through the Muslims to grow to a different level of their own existence. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Wal asr innal insana lafi khusr illa alladhina amanu wa amilus salihat wa tawasaw bil haqq wa tawasaw bis sabr. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen was salatu was salam ala ashrafil anbiya wal mursaleen wa alihi at-tayyibin at-tahirin. Amma ba'd, assalamu alaykum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Now I know when difficulties befall us, it is very confusing, the sort of difficulties we are seeing in Iran. And the preachers shy away and they do not talk about these things. Now I don't blame them because it's genuinely confusing. But not talking about things, hiding them or justifying them only backfires. And that is not good. As difficult as the conversation may be or the subject may be, it needs to be spoken of in order for us to rectify our thinking. There are 8 billion humans on the face of this earth. 4 billion of them are women. So they are equal parts. We can't just tell women what they are supposed to do and what they are not supposed to do. Maybe in the past it worked because of the evolutionary process of humanity, in which they were not given enough opportunities to grow. But now, in the 21st century, that attitude cannot work. They have to be involved in determining their own destiny. You can't determine what a woman is or what she should be or what she ought to be at the exclusion of the woman herself. She needs to be given that dignity that Allah gives to her and the Prophet gave to her, that look, you are an individual, it's your journey to God. You need to find your own self, you need to find your own state that is befitting and work towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. She needs to be involved in that and she needs to be respected as a human being. We are, in our history, we've been very oppressive to women. In Christian theology, women were seen halfway between animals and humans. And this is after the advent of Islam. The Quran says they are both equal in the sight of God. The Prophet came, and of course the Meccans were extremely unsettled by these sort of verses that the Quran was giving. We know that the women of Medina were far more liberal than the women of Mecca. And then when the Prophet migrated, the women of Mecca were adopting the attitudes of the women of Medina. And the men of Mecca who had migrated were extremely unhappy. And when the Prophet was increasing their liberties, the second Khalifa Umar goes to the Prophet and he says, look, this is not good. You will spoil them and they will be out of control. And of course, many of the measures that the Prophet wanted to take and the rights that he wanted to institutionalize, he had to hold back due to the limitation of the context. On many occasions, we find that the Prophet was more than happy to increase their liberties, to say to them, play an equal role to a man. But he couldn't because of the pressure from the Sahaba. And of course, in his human capacity, he had to assess his own context and work through his context. Now, think about it. When women are banned from wearing the scarf, they feel oppressed, and quite rightly they should. Why can't they wear the scarf if they want to? When the women are forced to wear the scarf, they feel oppressed, and quite rightly they should. You see, what the women are saying here is that we are equal human beings. Give us the right of discretion as to what we want to do. Now, I'm not hinting at Iran. I'm just saying it is their code of dress. So we can't just go and say, take off this code of dress. No, what I'm trying to say here is that, look, we need to acknowledge that human nature wants to be free. It wants to be liberated of coercion. It wants to make its own choices. We should follow the example of the Blessed Prophet. We should engage in conversation, not hide behind Islam. Now, I've heard speakers recently saying, well, it's in the Quran, hijab is in the Quran. I will say, well, if you allow for alternative interpretations of the Quran, you will find that hijab, the way you have understood it, might not be the only interpretation of it. Think about it carefully. The slaves were not ordained to wear hijab in the time of the Prophet. And we get this in our fatwas as well, that when the slave women were wearing hijab and praying, they were told to remove their hijab. How does that then equate with hijab? Then the Quran obliges the Muslim community with its obligations. And we know for a fact that the Prophet allowed the Christians to deal in wine, to brew it, to sell it, transact in it, and to consume it. And similarly, swine. The Muslims are prohibited from dealing in alcohol and its consumption. But those faiths who do not see it as a prohibition, the Prophet did not coerce them. Similarly, the flesh of swine. The Muslims were told, don't consume it. But others who consumed it, nonetheless, consumed it. The issue of interest. Islam forbade its interest within the folds of the transactions that took place within the community of the Muslims. Islam did not prohibit interest between the Muslims and the people of the book, nor did it prohibit interest within the people of the book themselves. Similarly, Islam never obliged the Christian and the Jewish women to cover their heads. It was up to them if they wanted to adopt that form of dress code or not. So if somebody has this argument that hijab means modesty in garment and modesty in behavior, and modesty can have variety of extensions, you might not find it agreeable, you might find that reasoning faulty, but at least engage with them. Talk, debate the issue. It might not have any merit, the argument, but the best way around is not to take positions. The best way is to engage, to gain further clarity, to respect the human mind, give dignity to human being, allow them to think for themselves. If they are endowed with the message, you will not need to coerce them at all. The other thing one or two things that I want to actually say quickly is, It is not right for the Muslim countries to blame other countries for the problems inside their own borders. I don't disagree that others are always causing strife within. It's a norm, isn't it? It's a norm. Every country does this. We want to destabilize a particular country, like we want to destabilize Russia, so we will assist Ukraine, right? It's the same thing. The Saudi Arabians do this, Iranians do this, everybody does it. India, Pakistan, it's become a norm. This ungodly act has become a norm. But the thing is, we can't blame foreigners for our problems. We need to understand that there is a problem at home, and we need to deal with it. The hijab issue might be symptomatic of many things that are there, that are going wrong, or that people don't understand, or maybe they are right, but people want to see a different way of doing things. And hijab might just have become that spark, the spark of everything else. So every country needs to introspect, to say, look, I can't just be so hung up that all my problems are from outside. They are internal problems. I need to take account and create a most conducive situation for these things to be discussed and for us to grow. When the Prophet came, he did not say to the people of his region that, look, you know what, your problems are due to the Romans and the Persians. He said, no, your problems are primarily your problems. If you don't have weakness in yourself, nobody else can exploit your weakness. It is not good for the Muslims to blame foreign powers for the problems that they have at home. The foreign powers will do their best to destabilize your country as you do your best to destabilize their country. It's the same thing. You're doing the same thing as they're doing to you. But they never blame that, oh no, it's because of X, Y, and Z theocracy that we are having Brexit. Brexit is our problem. It's a mess we have created, right? We have created a problem for ourselves, and we can't go and blame a theocracy that due to them we voted for Brexit, or that Putin somehow put it in our heads that we should vote for Brexit and now he's laughing. And you can't. It's our problem. It's our fault. We need to deal with it. The other thing I want to say here is that you can't trust social media. I mean, there might be truth in there, I'm not denying, but we cannot be led by WhatsApp text messages. Now I understand Iran has a problem, and I'm very sympathetic, and my heart pains that no region in this world should have any problems. I am not a Shia-centric person nor a Muslim-centric person. Yes, we should be humanitarians. Humanity is our family. But Iran, I'm very sympathetic to them, and my heart bleeds and pains. But it's not that we all jump on the bandwagon and we say that all of these protests are staged and they're all wrong, or we say that the country and the regime is wrong totally. It's not the way things work. We need to step back and get a realistic understanding that most of the information that comes to us via social media may not be accurate. So for example, there's and I'm going to finish with this, a text message going around of a young lady who had born in Iran, then lived in Vancouver, then went back to Iran, and now she's back to the West. I mean, it's a very painful, heartfelt message. I give that. But at the end, she says, I've heard from a friend of mine that people came out from the mosques, from a mosque after prayers, and then they protested against the government, and a helicopter came and opened fire at them, and 80 were killed. Now I'm saying, if something like that has happened, then surely it would have been reported somewhere. Surely somebody would have recorded it. There would be some news about it. We can't believe whatever people say. We need to be more mature than that, acknowledging that there is a problem. A solution needs to be found calmly, but at the same time, maintaining our neutrality and stating that, not siding with the narrative on this side or with the narrative on that side. Being true to our Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and being true to our commitment to our human family of wanting what is best for humanity. Now with that, I will ask us to pray Surah Fatiha for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bring calm in that region and calm around our world. Al-Fatiha.